We're here to see a film that I've tried to program here for a long time, and it just wasn't available. And I didn't want to show a DVD that looked like it was filmed through a piece of linoleum tile. So in my search, I found out that the only real extant, remastered, good 35 millimeter print resided at the George Eastman House Museum in Rochester, New York. So I called those good people. They were really, really nice. We had to fill out some documents that were, it was kind of the equivalent of buying a condominium here. They did not ask for the projectionist blood type, but it was close. However, all that being aside, they were very, very cooperative, and so we have the print here tonight of the Shanghai Gesture. And I'm very excited about that. And I'm even more excited that we have, as our special guests to introduce the film with me, we have the daughter of the male star of the film. We have Miss Victoria Mature is in the house with us, who has been a stalwart supporter of this festival and my dear friend. And we also have the son of one of the greatest directors to come out of the silent into the talkie era, Nick von Sternberg. So please give them a warm welcome to the stage. Thank you. This movie, when I wrote the program, Nick, I described it as kind of a fever dream of a movie. It's not the type of movie that just fits into a category. What did your father, if he shared with you, what did he think about this film, and what are your feelings about it overall?
Well, he never talked about it. He wrote about it in his autobiography, Fun in a Chinese Laundry. He wrote one paragraph about it, which basically said that it was kind of an excuse. He excused it as some of his post-Dietrich films. He mentioned all the actors, and your father, of course, he mentioned the other actors too. And I want to tell you about Mike Mazurki.
Tell me about we love Mike Mazurki, do we not?
Well, I worked with Mike Mazurki myself. And when Mike Mazurki met me, he cried. He said, my father started his career. He saw him wrestling at the Olympic, and he decided to cast him in Shanghai Gesture.
So your father saw him in a wrestling match and cast him, and that started, a 40, 50-year career for Mike Mazurki.
Exactly.
That's great. That's terrific. That's terrific. And your dad, he had come and he had either left or was borrowed from Hal Roach after 1 million years BC. Where was your dad at in Victoria in his career at this point?
Well, it was a real quick turnaround. 1935 to 39, he was at the Pasadena Playhouse, and that's where he got discovered by Hal Roach Studios. He was in a Ben Hecht play. We all love Ben Hecht here. So,
yes, we do.
He got discovered by Hal Roach Studios, and he starred in his very first 4 films. 3 of them he starred in. One he had a smaller role, but one of those was 1 million BC, and that was the most popular of all of them because of how scantily clad everyone was in the film. And my dad knew that if anyone was going to know him for anything other than grunting and groaning, he was going to have to go to New York, because that's what you did back then. You had to go to New York, you had to get on Broadway, you had to hopefully get good notices, and then you'd be noticed by the studios, and then you'd get a better part, or many, many parts. And this worked for my dad. He ended up starring in a very successful musical play called Lady in the Dark on Broadway. Kurt Weill did the music, Ira Gershwin, Moss Hart, and he got wonderful notices. That's where he got the title The Beautiful Hunk of Man, because that was actually in the writing of Moss Hart. And John Barrymore noticed him. And so when he came back to Hollywood in that same year, 1941, he was cast by von Sternberg in the Shanghai Gesture. And I'm proud to say that in that autobiography, Sternberg takes credit for furthering my dad's career and for furthering Gene Tierney's career in Fun in a Chinese Laundry. And then while he's filming Shanghai Gesture, he gets cast in I Wake Up Screaming. And And then before either one of these are released, my dad has a contract at 20th Century Fox. So all of that happened in 1941. And then at the end of 1941, we entered World War II. So the whole trajectory then changes.
Nick, your dad, he wasn't a guy that really worked in the theater. He was really a film director. And one of the things I noticed when I ran the DVD of this is that when your father's name appears on screen, underneath it, it has ASC, which means that he was invited to be a member of the American Society of Cinematographers. As a cinematographer yourself, your father really created not only the look of Marlene Dietrich, but also with films like Underworld, The Docks of New York, you could argue that he created like the film noir look.
Well, my father was an artist primarily. He started drawing when he was just a child. I've seen his early drawings. And he treated his film subject like a painting. Every frame was done like a painting. And he burned a net. He actually had a large net over the actors. And he burned holes in it in order to light them and to create light and shadow.
Wow.
And they've never done that on any other film, and that's why those films have such a unique look.
Yeah. I remember reading an interview with the great James Wong Howe, and he made a comment. He said, the only director I ever worked with that could light a set by himself was Josef von Sternberg. So he really knew that. And his relationship with Dietrich, very long, very complicated, but he really made the Dietrich into the mysterious temptress, if you will, in the early 30s with Morocco, Shanghai Express. Did you have any involvement or interface with Dietrich, and what was your take on their relationship?
Well, I knew Marlene, of course, and I sat on her lap as a child.
Mic drop.
She treated me so wonderfully.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I have very sweet memories of her.
Right.
I mean, is it true that your father taught Marlene Dietrich how to light herself, and then she insisted on that kind of lighting, or she actually created it for herself on many projects following?
Well, she must have picked up a lot from working with my father. She stood in for herself during his, and you know, he'd take a long time to light, and she'd sit in, she'd be her own stand-in during all that time, and she studied lighting from learning by example with him. And I worked with Hal Moore for a couple of years, and he told me that when she first started to work with him on Vestry Rides Again,
right,
she said she'd come onto the set and she'd say, "Where are you, Joe?" And she'd insist on lighting the set, and he actually walked off the set and he left his meter there in her hands and told her
Hal
she
Moore
could light
did
it.
that. By the way, Hal Moore, for those of you not familiar, has shot just about everything. He shot The Jazz Singer, Captain Blood, a lot of the great Warner Brothers films. I'm missing stuff, but he was a legendary cinematographer.
And The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
And The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yeah, I
wonderful.
mean, and he let Dietrich have his light meter
Yes.
and light herself.
Yeah, because she complained about his lighting.
I'm thinking about Touch of Evil, how her lighting looks different from everyone else's.
Yeah,
in that entire film.
Billy Wilder said that in A Foreign Affair and Witness for the Prosecution, she said she would tell where the lights needed to be for her, and she learned that from your father.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Now, so your father kind of considered this more of a footnote of his career, or was his career kind of downtrending from the hits in the early 30s?
Well, he considered it part of the later part of his career, like The King Steps Out and Sergeant Madden.
Right.
Those films were done post-Dietrich.
Now, your dad, when he came to Fox, at first they put him in those musicals, and I remember reading something that he thought that he believed that Zanuck, who ran everything at Fox, who previewed every piece of film and ran the entire studio, that Zanuck didn't think much of him, at least to begin with. But then I read a letter from Zanuck where he
I know where you're
said,
going.
you know, Victor Mature is criminally underrated. And
Yes,
talk
yes.
talk about that. What was your dad's his tenure at Fox? How did he feel about all of that?
Well, I think the films, the musicals you're talking about from 1942, those followed directly after the start of World War II. So he made I Wake Up Screaming, and then World War II happens, and then he makes 4 movies, and they're all musicals. 3 are for Fox, one's for RKO, with Betty Grable and with Lucille Ball and with Rita Hayworth, who he has a relationship with. And then he spends 3 years in the Coast Guard, and he wonders at the end of his time in the Coast Guard if he's going to have a career, because he's never really made his mark yet,
Right.
with those musicals and things. And so thankfully, Daryl Zanuck really championed my dad and insisted that John Ford cast him in My Darling Clementine as Doc Holliday. And that, again, changes the trajectory of my dad's career significantly. It's the first time he got really good notices, and it went from people saying all he can do is grunt and groan to saying, oh, all he needed was the right film, So it's like real change.
Yeah.
And then the noirs came after that, the Kiss of Death and the Cry of the City, and then the blockbusters, the biblical movies.
Did your dad? I got the feeling your dad was not someone that looked back. I mean, he originally retired when he was 46. And he said, there's nothing wrong with loafing and playing golf, and I like to do that. But did he talk about any of his Fox films like Cry of the City or Kiss of Death, or was that all in the rearview mirror?
The things he talked about were the film with Ford, My Darling Clementine, and Kiss of Death and Cry of the City. Those were the first times that the critics had anything good to say about him. And so and he knew, and he was proud of his performances specifically in those films, very much so.
Did he ever talk about the Shanghai Gesture at all, or that was too far away?
I think it might have been pretty far away. I know he thought that it was the first time, thanks to von Sternberg, that he got to do something, again, besides crunching and groaning, right? I mean, he gets to recite the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam in this film. He gets to sort of slither and be serpentine and wanton. It's all the things you haven't seen him do yet, and some of the things that he had done when he was at the Pasadena Playhouse, but nobody knew that because he hadn't done them in a movie. Yeah.
Now, how much was your dad involved in the script of this movie, if you know? Because this movie, apparently, they tried like umpteen times to get it past the censor, and they had to do some major changes from the play. For example, Mother Jin Sling's name was Mother Goddamn.
Mother Goddam.
Goddam. And she didn't run a casino, she ran a bawdy house. And there's some changes to Gene Tierney's lineage for the sake of censorship. But did your dad get involved with the script in this movie and his other movies, or did he mainly focus on the visual?
I think he focused on the visual. I don't think he had a lot to do with the script, but he was really interested in he was probably more interested in it when it was a little bit baudy.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and the trying to get that through the production code was just another film like that was Double Indemnity that we'll see on Sunday. That originally that was supposed to be filmed back in the 30s, and they just had trouble after trouble, and finally, Billy Wilder and Raymond Chandler were able to crack the spine on that. Your dad's career tapered off after 1941. Was that due to his health, or due to Hollywood, or changing tastes? What's your opinion on that, Nick?
Well, he had a kind of a mental breakdown after Hitler invaded Austria in '38.
Yeah.
And he was kind of recuperating from that when he did Shanghai Gesture, actually. And he directed some of it while he was in a couch that was brought on the set. But he did operate the camera on Shanghai Gesture. Sometimes some of the crane shots were operated by him.
Yeah, he had Paul Ivano there as the nominal DOP.
And then when the war came along, he did a film for the Office of War Information. He worked for them.
Is that called The Town?
Yes.
That's a beautiful film.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really shows how well, you should say what it shows, but it excites me because it was beautiful. This one town, they show how all these people who live in this town came from all over the world, that the town was international. And then there's all these really interesting, rapid single shots of children's faces, reminiscent of Underworld, but very different from Underworld. And it really showed what it was that people were fighting for, but not in a precious way. It was really beautifully shot. I loved it. So anyway, sorry. I'm in the fan club apparently. Sorry.
Nick, what was some of the background? Your father shot a film for Charlie Chaplin and directed a film for him, and then it was never released. What was this backstory?
He did a film called The Seagull for Charlie Chaplin in 1926. And as far as I know, he was the only director that Chaplin ever hired.
Besides Chaplin, yeah.
And they were friends, of course, Charlie Chaplin and my dad. And he showed the film once, and it was seen by a critic at the time. I forgot his name, though. But it was supposedly the most beautiful film that had been done up till that time. And then he just locked it away, and it was never seen again. And he left specific instructions in his will that the remaining, he had a 16 millimeter print of it, and it was to be destroyed when
this was Chaplin?
Death. Yeah.
Oh, God, what a shame. What a waste. And I know some of your father's films, like the case of Lena Smith, has disappeared, and a number of his silent films have disappeared, unfortunately, which is...
The case of Lena Smith existed at Paramount until 1947 when Curtis Harrington saw it, but it's disappeared since then.
Yeah, I know that they've looked for that, and
it's probably been rendered.
Probably, yeah. I always, they're still looking for the Orson Welles rough cut of The Magnificent Ambersons in South America. They're still looking for that. TCM actually has employed people to go hunt for that because they were cutting it, and Robert Wise and Mark Robson did an initial cut per Welles' instructions and then sent the print to him, and it disappeared, and then subsequently the film was canceled. The negative was incinerated, Welles was fired, and so forth. But there's still people looking for that original cut of that film. So another lost story. Now, for your dad, what was his career arc? And this is, I feel like Perry Mason because I'm asking the question that I know the answer to.
Okay.
But what was his career arc after he left Fox?
Well, he made, because of the success of his noir films in the post-World War II, ironically, he was cast in Cecil B. DeMille's comeback epic, Samson and Delilah, which catapulted my dad into international stardom, which continued on into, well, we're back to Fox, though, Into the Robe, 1953, Demetrius and the Gladiators, 1954, that wonderful Fleischman film that we saw. The 1951
Violent Saturday. Yeah, that was actually his last
awesome.
Fox film. Yeah.
And then of course he went to, that was kind of towards the end of his fame. He did some work in England with The Long Haul, which we showed right? And then he did a couple films where he co-produced them with John Wayne's production company and China Doll and Escort West. He did two of like the kind of B movies of his career, Hannibal, and then The Tartars with Orson Welles. That was an interesting one. He had to take a break after that for about 5 years, and then he was with Peter Sellers in After the Fox, which was one of my absolute favorites.
A great film.
That
is a great film.
I love that.
I mean, your father's really kind of making fun of himself.
His physical comedy ability is amazing, and just
great.
him making fun of his own Hollywood leading man image. He has absolutely no shame. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Now, your dad, when I think there was Macau, and that was when Howard Hughes was changing directors, like some people change their clothes, and then there was Jet Pilot, and after that, he taught for a while at USC. What did he teach specifically at USC?
He made a film after that.
He did make the Japanese film.
We went to Japan for a year.
Right.
And he made that film, and he he taught at USC and he taught at UCLA, and we went around. We went to Europe for a year, and he went to all the film festivals, and they made a big deal out of that. He was president of the jury and all that.
He must have liked that.
Oh yeah,
He must have liked that. He must have
and he
liked that.
tried to make films in France and so forth, but nobody wanted to make a film with him. He was, out of touch.
Out of
with
touch,
filmmaking.
and Hollywood had moved on.
Would
and
you talk a
people
little bit
moved
about
on.
Anatahan?
Well, I was just a baby when Anatahan was made, and I spoke Japanese before I spoke English. As a matter of fact,
Wow.
I was raised by a Japanese nurse. Well, my mother and father were working on the film. But Anatan is a very beautiful film, and it exists on DVD. You can see it still to this day. And it's really my favorite film, and it was narrated by my father. You can hear his voice throughout the film. And he shot it also with Kozo Okazaki. Kozo Okazaki was the cameraman, but my father was cameraman actually. And it's beautiful. It was a black and white film, and he had total control of the set. He'd go in and paint the highlights with aluminum paint so they reflected more, and he'd paint the shadows with orange shellac so they'd have some depth in the shadows. He really employed all the tricks that he knew when he shot it. It took a long time to shoot it also.
And you just recently honored your father. Yeah, talk about that. That was why you weren't here.
That's why I was. I'm so sorry I missed it. I missed such wonderful guests and films, and I'm so sorry. But
no,
sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, my dad's film career and his passion for playing golf are inextricable. He started playing golf, I think, right after World War II, and then of course there's that famous story in the middle of the 1950s when my dad is at the height of his fame, and he decides, okay, I want to join the LA Country Club. So he goes to the club and says, hey, I'd like to be a member. And they say, oh, Victor, I'm so sorry, but we don't allow actors to be members of the club. And he says, I'm no actor, and I've got 64 pictures to prove it. So, he managed to raise millions of dollars in money for charities by playing hundreds and hundreds of celebrity golf tournaments all over the world. He played in England. He used to go back all the time to Louisville, Kentucky, to the Foster Brooks tournament, because that's where my dad was born, in Louisville, his old Kentucky home. And he would play at the Andy Williams, and then out here in the desert at the Bob Hope and the Frank Sinatra. And in Rancho Santa Fe, where he lived and where he played golf since the later 1950s, and he traveled back and forth. The Rancho Santa Fe Golf Club, he started a tournament there in 1981, and it was to benefit the employees of the golf club, because at that time, apparently I was told this yesterday. I was told many stories yesterday, some I probably shouldn't have heard, but I was told by one woman who used to work as a waitress there that at that time they were not paid very well, and they did not have health care. So my dad said, well, I'm going to take care of that. And he used to like accost people at the snack cart and be like, okay, you cheap son of a bitch, give me $20 for this, and he would just, so I got to hear a lot of fun stories like that. But it's nice when you hear those stories, and it has to do with your father helping people. And I think that's what the thing he was most proud of about his career and his notoriety is that he was able to use that to help people. And so that's
great.
I'm pleased to.
That's great.
Thanks.
That's great. I'm really looking forward to seeing this, as the audience is. I've never seen it on a big screen before, and having the son of the director and the daughter of the star and a 35 millimeter print of this movie, everyone here tonight made the right decision. So thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Nick. And let's watch the Shanghai Gesture. Thank you.